want to do the speaking. In particular, most of the reason is the fact that he feels that the information is too harsh, that it's going to be too shocking for people to hear many of these things, that it will be very disturbing to them. And he's probably right. You can't just show up somewhere at a meeting and start talking about things and telling people, well, this is what life is, and there isn't any God the way you think of it, and everything you know is wrong. Well, that's not exactly how you approach people. But on Billy's hand, he's telling Hans that the truth can be very harsh, and quite often when people are led astray, that to hear the truth about things can be rather shocking. That's also true. But there are ways to present information so people don't feel challenged and threatened. I mean, after all, just like Ask It says, we're all on our own path of evolution, and even though you hear somebody say something, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to believe it. We're all working on different things at different times, so it's important always when you present information, you present it just as an inspiration, and just for what it really is, it's just words of information. It's not part of anybody's life yet, they haven't experienced it. So people who are open-minded, and remember, be open-minded, it's a sign of intelligence, it's okay to listen to things. Anytime you feel yourself getting too locked into something, too dead set on something, you're probably getting a little closed-minded, and you want to be cautious. You may have run across some absolute truth that you can now keep for now on, and that's good to hang on to. But in many cases, people get very hard-headed about things which are incorrect anyway, and it's very hard to get them loose from it. So I can appreciate Hans's problem, especially in Europe. I've had my own experiences with people in Switzerland and Germany, and a little closed-mindedness here and there, so I can understand what he was up against. Well, anyway, Billy has shown up at the contact with a letter from Hans stating that he doesn't really want to do this. But before he gets a chance to say anything, Semyosi is rambling on about how disappointed they are that Billy's not doing any public speaking, that he has jeopardized the mission. They're 10 months into the mission, and he's not moving ahead with this, so they've decided to put Billy on probation, that they're not going to see him for a month. It'll be sometime in November, so he has time to think this over. And that they feel they've been deceived somehow by Billy, because he has said all along that he was going to do public speaking and get the information out to the public, and he's not done this. Well, Billy, of course, he stops her and he calms her down because she seems to be a little excited. And he calms her down and explains that he has been trying. And here's a letter from Hans explaining what he's doing. And she reads the letter, and she's really kind of taken back by it a little bit and surprised that Hans is taking the attitude that he is. Because you got to remember, the Pleiadians, even though they're older than us, have higher technology, that doesn't mean they understand us that well. They don't live in the same kind of morality. They don't have the same kind of problems, especially social problems and social pressures like we do. Hans has got a tough problem here. ETs have come and educated Billy. They have not educated Hans. Billy's just giving all this information, writing a speech out for Hans, and expects Hans to go out like a little robot in front of a crowd and read this stuff off. Well, that'd be a tough job, especially since it's not Hans's truth. Hans hasn't had the benefit of all the experiences that Billy has, so it's not true for him. It's just secondhand information. He may not even believe in a lot of it yet. So far to him it may just be information. Well, at any rate, Semyosi's upset by the letter. She goes back to the beam ship with Billy, and they get Ptah on the screen there. They're kind of having a conference call of some type. And she reads the letter again to Ptah, and Ptah understands, and he comments he understands Hans's situation, his problem, but he also understands that Hans is, in his letter, apparently kind of twisted things his own way too, and has accused the Pleiadians of doing things that they haven't, and he's accused Billy, and he's calling Billy names and so forth, that he's this and he's that. So Hans has gotten a little excited on his own also. So Ptah just calms everybody down and says, well, that's fine. If Hans doesn't want to do it, we understand. Everybody has to make their own decisions, and he's not particularly upset by it at all. As a matter of fact, he seems to have a very highly evolved, open-minded view towards all people, and understands that people have different problems with different things in life, and that's okay. We all just kind of have to follow our own path. I know for myself, it was a big lesson for me younger in life when I finally dawned on me one day that we do have to give everybody space to be themselves. And when we can start looking at somebody else as just an individual spirit on their own path without any prejudice, when we quit looking at them materially, when we look at them just as a spirit of nature or a spirit of God, whatever you want to call it, on their own path, then you can start to appreciate them. You almost find a little humor in looking at someone and seeing what they're doing with their life. But then you don't feel prejudice and anger. I've always kind of been like that, and it was refreshing for me in this material to find that attitude even more reinforced. I don't always find in the contact notes where the Plejadians are particularly aware of this, even though they say it, but they seem to have pushed a lot of on Billy, telling Billy how important it is that he do things, and leaning on him by telling him, that the world is going to go bad if you don't perform this mission, and the whole world is waiting on you. And there's a lot of pressure on Billy to perform back in these times. So it's not hard to understand why he's had the difficulties that he has in life. Well, anyway, they read the letter of Hans and so forth, and after the Ptah reads the letter and responds to it to Billy, then Billy understands a little bit better, and everybody seems to be a little calmed down, but still, Billy's not getting out in the public, and the information isn't getting out. So far, it's just in his house, and a small group of people that come and read it there are just his friends. And Semyosi reiterates that they're trying very hard to get information out, and they really do feel love for the Earth person. They live in a very loving, happy, kind of blissful society, and they really don't understand us that well. They don't have hate, anger, prejudice, and jealousy on their world like we do. They are kind of more like Spock-like Spock in a blissful meditation, just kind of a even-tempered, blissful sort of person, is the impression I get about them. And they have trouble understanding how to relay information and expect reactions from us, the earthworms. And I suppose that our logic and our attitudes sometimes are quite a surprise to them. I think they can't understand why Billy just doesn't go out on the street corner and everybody will listen. Well, as they've been speaking so much about Hans, and they're in the beam ship, Semyosi wants to show Billy something kind of unusual. She says, quite often, because they have trouble understanding Earth people and people on other worlds when they're studying them, and I do believe that part of the Pleiadian contacts were probably mostly just like an experiment on their end. There was only a handful of the Pleiadians that actually had the contacts with Billy. It was not like the whole Pleiadian race came here to make contact with us. There was just a few of them. So I think it was kind of experimental on their side, too, to see, to try to learn more about how to understand us. So there's a lot of different ways to look at these Pleiadian contacts. She says one of the devices that they have on board the ship is a device that actually can read the conscious mind and the subconscious mind of someone and even look into their future a little bit. Apparently the ability to see the future or future visions is within all of us, that we are really creating our future as we go along, and as proof of that, she showed something to Billy. She says, watch this. And there's a little device that looked kind of like a world globe or a round ball in the ship, and she put her hand on it, and she says, now think of Hans, which she does, and she saw Hans on the screen. Billy says, well, I can read that screen. And apparently what you see on the screen is some sort of symbols and so forth. And these are symbols that Billy had somehow learned in meditation when he was younger. Things that had been opened up in his mind about sign and symbols and what they mean and how to translate them into language. Billy begins to read some of the symbols on the screen, and he says, I understand that. You're looking at Hans on this ball. And she says, yeah, I am. And he says, well, wait a minute. That's not Hans now. That's Hans in 2 days, right? And she was surprised that he understood the symbols actually as well as he did. Once again, the old problem with tape, so I'll see you on the next side.